Everyone thought she was just the intern, the quiet black girl from Southside Chicago with thrift store shoes and a scholarship smile. Nobody noticed how sharp her eyes were. Nobody paid attention when she lingered outside the billionaire's office, until one day she leaned in close and whispered, "There's a camera in your ceiling." That single sentence shattered a billion-dollar engagement, exposed a web of corporate betrayal, and brought one of the most powerful women in America to her knees, all because one girl dared to look up and speak. Zariah James walked the halls of Kincaid Holdings like a ghost. At just 19, she was the youngest intern the multi-billion-dollar firm had ever taken in. She came from a forgotten block on the South Side, where sirens replaced lullabies and opportunity rarely knocked, let alone walked through the door in patent leather shoes. Her mother always said, "Blend in until you don't have to." So she did, until the day she didn't. She was quiet, observant. A girl who listened when others spoke too loudly. She didn't speak unless she was asked, and no one ever asked. Not the managers who called her by the wrong name. Not the associates who handed her empty coffee cups and asked her to refill them. Not even Victoria Langford, the CEO's pristine fiancé, who glanced through her as though Zariah were a stray reflection on the glass. But Wesley Kincaid noticed her, at least a little. The man who wore midnight black suits and carried the weight of the company like an Olympic torch. He didn't remember her name at first, but he held the door for her. Once, in the elevator, he asked her where she went to school. She said, "Howard." He nodded, said, "Good choice," and looked genuinely pleased. That was enough to stay loyal. Her internship wasn't supposed to be like this. She had imagined brainstorming sessions with think tanks, code breaking, research, invention. But most of her time was spent delivering folders and pretending not to hear people gossip about her clothes, her hair, her skin. What she learned, though, couldn't be taught in any MBA program: how to study people when they forget you're there. It was late on a Thursday when she first noticed it. She had dropped off documents in Mr. Kincaid's office and turned to leave. But something made her pause. Maybe it was the soft clicking sound that didn't belong. Maybe it was instinct, the same survival radar she honed growing up, where eyes in the back of your head could mean the difference between safety and tragedy. She stepped backward just slightly and tilted her head. There, high in the molding between the bookshelf and the recessed lighting, something metallic, small, round, blinking so faintly it looked like the pulse of a dying star. A camera. Zariah didn't scream. She didn't gasp. She simply blinked and left the room, heartbeat steady, face unreadable. Someone was watching Wesley Kincaid, and she doubted he knew. She thought about it all night. Who put it there? Why? Was it some company protocol she hadn't been briefed on? Or something worse? Something criminal? The next morning she said nothing, but the image haunted her. The pulse of that red light, the stillness of the air around it, and the quiet confirmation in her gut. Someone was spying on the most powerful man in the building. And now, she was the only one who knew. Victoria Langford was the kind of woman who looked like she belonged at the top of a newsfeed. She moved through the Kincaid Holdings headquarters like a walking press release, heels clicking in controlled rhythm, designer dress stitched to perfection, and a smile that was photo-ready at all times. Every assistant she passed straightened. Every executive tried to charm her. She didn't need a name tag. Everyone already knew who she was. Victoria was engaged to Wesley Kincaid, the tech magnate with boyish charm and a war chest that could fund a small country. Together they were dubbed the Silicon Dynasty by the press. It was the sort of pairing that made people dream or resent. Victoria had been raised in power. Her father was a senator. Her mother, old money Bostonian with connections dating back to the founding fathers. She attended the best prep schools, drank from crystal before she could spell champagne, and understood the value of influence the way some people understood math. To outsiders, she and Wesley were the perfect match. But Zariah James saw something no one else was looking for. Zariah was invisible to most, the quiet intern in the back of the room, always scribbling, always watching. Her cubicle was just 2 turns and a hallway from the executive suite, close enough to observe the daily rhythms of Wesley Kincaid's empire. She noticed things: who entered meetings first, who left angry, who smiled too much, who didn't smile at all. She noticed when Victoria started arriving earlier than everyone else, not once or twice, but regularly. She also noticed what Victoria was always carrying: a monogrammed laptop case she never let go of, not even in the lounge, not even in the bathroom. She clutched it like a lifeline. Some days she walked straight into Wesley's private office when he was out. "I'm just waiting for Wes," she'd chirp to the assistants. No one dared question her. She was practically royalty. But Zariah questioned everything. One Thursday afternoon, 2 days after she saw the hidden camera, Zariah had just finished delivering quarterly reports when she caught a glimpse of Victoria inside the CEO's office. The door was cracked slightly open, just enough for her to see Victoria standing at Wesley's desk. She wasn't waiting. She was typing. Her body was angled toward the screen like she was downloading something. No eye contact with the assistants, no idle chit-chat, just quiet, practiced speed. Zariah kept walking, but her mind began running scenarios like code. What was she doing in his files? Why always when he wasn't there? Why was she asking managers about specific patent portfolios she had no stake in? And why did the light blink above that bookshelf only after Victoria had entered the room? That night, Zariah stayed late, under the pretense of organizing research binders. But her real mission was surveillance. She positioned herself near the break room, close enough to hear but far enough to remain ignored. Victoria walked past around 7:30 p.m., alone again, with her laptop case and an oddly quiet urgency in her step. Wesley had already left for the day. Zariah's skin prickled. The woman moved like someone with an objective. She didn't want to believe it. She had grown up assuming the worst in people because life had forced her to. This internship, this place, was supposed to prove that success wasn't always corrupt. That hard work could live alongside ethics. But Victoria Langford was making her doubt. Still, Zariah said nothing. She spent the weekend combing through news articles and press releases about Victoria. On the surface, it was a pristine record, but Zariah had a gift for reading between lines. In one article, Victoria was listed as a special consultant to a foreign trade tech firm. Strange, she had no tech background. In another, she was seen at a gala with two high-ranking execs from a Chinese infrastructure group known for industrial espionage. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe not. Then there were the whispers, rumors in online message boards, blind items on finance blogs, mentions of an anonymous leak plaguing Kincaid Holdings for months. Nothing confirmed, just smoke. And now she'd seen the spark. On Monday morning, Zariah sat at her desk, watching the office buzz with its usual shallow urgency. Victoria entered like always, light perfume, tight smile, hand linked casually through Wesley's arm. They looked like a magazine cover, laughing, flawless. But Zariah's chest tightened. She could feel it, a growing weight of truth pressing against her ribs. Something was wrong, not just morally, but dangerously. If Victoria was the leak, if she was recording private meetings or stealing intellectual property, this was more than just a scandal. It could destroy Wesley's entire empire. And she was walking into his office every day like she owned it. No one else saw it. But Zariah did. That morning, Wesley called an impromptu staff meeting. Victoria sat next to him, legs crossed, nodding at all the right moments. She asked a lot of questions, too many, especially when Wesley mentioned a new security patent his team was developing for encrypted data sharing. Would that apply to international clients as well? Victoria asked sweetly. Zariah felt the hairs on her arms stand up. That question didn't belong. Later that day, Wesley crossed paths with Zariah in the hallway. She hesitated, then looked him dead in the eyes, really looked for the first time. His eyes were tired, worried. Maybe he didn't have proof, maybe he had suspicions, but no one to say it aloud. Zariah opened her mouth, closed it, then finally said in a whisper, "Sir, I think something's wrong." Wesley paused, tilted his head. "With what?" She swallowed, heart thudding in her ears. "Your office. It's not safe." He stared at her for a long moment, the smile fading from his face. And for the first time, she knew he was listening. Zariah didn't sleep for 3 nights. The blinking eye of that tiny camera haunted her in silence, flashing in her mind every time she closed her eyes. She kept wondering, who put it there? Who were they watching? Every answer seemed to circle back to the same chilling possibility. Someone was watching Wesley Kincaid, and they were watching him closely. She considered reporting it anonymously, maybe through HR or cybersecurity, but something in her gut told her that wouldn't work. She had seen how rumors traveled in the building. Whispers didn't stay whispers. If the wrong person caught wind of what she'd found, it might disappear, and so might she. She also knew something else. Nobody would take her seriously. She was the intern. She had no office. No title, no clout. The only weapon she had was the truth, and her timing. So she waited. She watched the CEO's schedule like a hawk, knew when he'd be in meetings, when he had his meditation breaks, and when his office was usually clear. On Thursday, just after 6 p.m., she saw her moment. The staff had mostly cleared out. Victoria Langford had left early in her usual flurry of perfume and pearls. The floor was quiet. The lights dimmed to their warm nighttime hue. And Wesley. Kincaid was alone in his office, reviewing something on his sleek silver laptop. Zariah's palms were sweating, but her heart was strangely calm. It was a kind of clarity, like when you step into the street without realizing it, and a car nearly misses you. The world slows down. You breathe differently. She walked to his door and knocked lightly. Wesley looked up, surprised to see her. "Zariah, right?" he said, gesturing her in. "You're still here?" "Aye." "Yes," she said softly, stepping in. "May I speak with you? Just for a minute." Something in her tone made him set the laptop aside. He studied her face, the focus in her eyes, the way she stood like she was balancing on a wire. "Of course," he said, and gestured toward the chair across from him. She shook her head. "I'll stand." Wesley raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Then Zariah leaned forward slightly, just enough to keep her voice from carrying beyond the walls. Her eyes didn't leave his. "There's a camera in your office," she whispered. Silence. Not disbelief. Not confusion. Just stillness. Wesley blinked once. "Where?" she pointed. "Upper left corner behind the recessed molding, above the bookshelf." He stood slowly, walking toward the wall. He reached up, eyes narrowing, then stood on the edge of the credenza to get a closer look. A moment later, his fingers brushed something cold and unfamiliar. He pulled it down. It was there, real. A pin-sized wireless micro camera no bigger than a bottle cap. It wasn't company-issued, and it certainly wasn't his. His face changed. The sharp businessman veneer dropped like a curtain. For the first time, Zariah saw something else behind his eyes. Not rage, not fear. Calculation. He turned toward her. "How did you know?" "I noticed it by accident," she said. 3 nights ago. I didn't know what to do." "Why tell me?" "Because—" She swallowed. "I think someone's watching you, and I don't think it's for your protection." Wesley nodded slowly and sat down, placing the camera on his desk like it was an explosive device. "Has anyone else seen you looking at it? Have you told anyone else?" "No," she said. "Just you." "Good," he said. "That's smart." There was a pause, tense and unspeakably strange. Here she was, the intern from Southside Chicago, standing in the private office of a billionaire, the two of them staring down at a spy camera like co-conspirators in a political thriller. "I want you to tell me everything," he said. "Everything you remember from the day you saw it, what time it was, who was nearby, what was going on around you." And so she did. She retraced her steps with surgical detail, the time she entered, the files she dropped off, how she had paused, the way the light caught the lens, the soft electronic hum. Wesley listened without interrupting. His fingers tapped silently against the desk. When she finished, he stood again, this time walking to a wall safe embedded behind a painting. With a few quick taps, he unlocked it and pulled out a sleek black case. From inside, he retrieved a secure phone, one she had never seen anyone use in the building before. "I'm calling in a cyber forensics team," he said. "My own people." Not the company's. This doesn't leave this room. Zariah nodded. Understood. He glanced at her again. You're brave. She didn't respond, only offered a faint shrug. I've been quiet all my life. People talk over me, walk past me, but I've always watched. I see things they miss. Wesley looked at her long and hard, then cracked a brief smile, just enough to be real. Good, he said. We need more people like you. A few minutes later, a secure call was made. The cybersecurity team was on its way, landing in LA on a private jet before midnight. Zariah excused herself and returned to the empty intern bullpen, her heart finally pounding, her fingers trembling. She had no idea what kind of game she'd stepped into, but she knew this much. She had just changed something, broken the surface of something deep and dangerous. She had stepped out of the shadows, and Wesley Kincaid was no longer the only one being watched. The black SUV rolled into the underground garage at 3:07 a.m., unmarked and silent. 4 men stepped out, dressed in muted tactical gear, no logos, no names. They moved like a unit trained to disappear in seconds. Zariah watched from the mezzanine, above the lobby as Wesley met them at the private elevator. He didn't greet them, just nodded, and they vanished upward into the executive suite. She shouldn't have been there that late. Her internship hours ended long ago, but Wesley had asked her to stay. You've already proven you know how to keep a secret, he had said. I may need that again tonight. So she waited. For hours she sat at her desk, watching the digital clock tick forward. It was eerily quiet. The building's personality shifted after midnight. Gone were the sharp heels, the artificial laughter, the corporate noise. It felt exposed now, vulnerable, like something had finally stopped pretending. By morning, the energy in the building was off. The executives arrived in waves, their polished shoes and steel water bottles clashing with the heavy air. None of them knew what had transpired in Wesley's office overnight. But Zariah knew, and she could see it in Wesley's face when he emerged just after 8 a.m., tight-jawed, eyes rimmed in fatigue. The cybersecurity team had stayed all night. Every device in his office had been taken apart, phones, pens, even his decorative globe. The findings were worse than he'd feared. The single camera Zariah discovered wasn't alone. There were 3 more, one behind a decorative vent, one inside a fake electrical outlet, and a 4th embedded in the frame of a photo of his late father. All small, all broadcasting somewhere offshore. Whoever planted them knew what they were doing. Wesley had insisted on a full diagnostic sweep of not just his office, but his devices, digital logs, and servers. Within hours, his team uncovered patterns of data leakage that had been running quietly for over 6 weeks. Emails, voice memos, even live meetings had been silently streamed to an encrypted server in the Seychelles, hidden behind layers of spoofed IPs and false destinations. They were being watched, played, and the worst part? The breach had only occurred in Wesley's private files. Not the general company systems, not board memos, not public reports. No, someone was only interested in what he was seeing, what he was doing, the moves he was planning. That narrowed the suspect pool considerably. Zariah was summoned to his office mid-morning. She entered and paused as she noticed a new tension in the air. His desk was bare except for the photos that had been dismantled and scanned. 2 of the forensics agents stood off to the side, murmuring over tablets. Close the door, Wesley said. She obeyed. He gestured for her to sit, and then slid a sleek monitor across the desk. There's something I want you to see. The screen lit up with grainy, high-angle surveillance footage. Zariah realized instantly. This was from the hidden camera in his bookshelf. The angle was tight but clear enough to see who entered and left the office. The timestamp scrolled through the bottom. It was footage from a week ago. Then she saw her, Victoria Langford. She glided into the room with a grace that didn't match the time, nearly midnight. Wesley wasn't there. She walked straight to his desk, typed something into the tablet, and then paused. Victoria turned toward the bookshelf. Her face, partially lit, was calm, almost too calm. Then she stepped onto the nearby armchair, reached into the molding above the shelf and adjusted something. Zariah felt her throat tighten. I thought she just came in here to leave you notes or prep your itinerary, she said slowly. Wesley didn't respond at first. Then he exhaled, an exhale that sounded like it came from the center of his spine. "I thought that too," he said, "until we scrubbed the metadata from the camera's logs." She activated and recalibrated the feed. Zariah felt a pulse of cold run down her arms. "You think she planted it?" "I think," Wesley said, his voice low and precise, "that someone very close to me gave someone else access, and I think that someone is Victoria." He looked at her then, not as an intern, not as a curious girl from nowhere, but as someone who had cracked open a wall no one else had dared touch. "Zariah," he said carefully, "do you remember anything else? Anything strange in the last few weeks? About her? Her questions?" Zariah hesitated, and then nodded. "She asked about the Indonesian bid last week," she said. "Said you were putting too many eggs in the Pacific basket. I thought it was weird, because that bid hadn't been made public yet. Not even internally." Wesley leaned back, jaw tight. "She's been selling my private intelligence," he said flatly, "to international investors, probably for months. Strategic theft disguised as pillow talk." Zariah stared at the screen, heart thudding. This wasn't just betrayal, it was theft. And Wesley wasn't just a man being cheated on. He was a man being systematically dismantled from the inside. "We'll need more," he said finally, turning to the cybersecurity agents. "Footage, timestamps, confirmation." Then, to Zariah, more gently, "I need your help again." She straightened her shoulders. "Tell me what to do." He gave a tired smile. "We're going to let her think she's still winning, until we're ready to end the game." Wesley Kincaid had built his fortune on foresight, seeing patterns others missed, trusting his gut when logic faltered. But nothing in his billion-dollar empire had prepared him for the cold, digital trail that now led directly to the woman he was days away from marrying. Victoria Langford. The daughter of a senator, a face sculpted for magazine covers, a voice trained in diplomacy and charm. She was elegant, poised, and according to the security team's analysis, an industrial spy. But he didn't confront her. Not yet. He needed to be sure. He needed to see her mask slip with his own eyes. So he invited her to a confidential meeting with his executive team, a fabricated pitch about a sensitive government tech contract. It was bait. High-stakes bait. The room was full of trusted insiders with one exception, Zariah. She sat in the corner, notebook open, eyes steady, nearly invisible. Victoria barely noticed her. That was her mistake. Victoria entered the room, radiant as always, her designer coat draped over her arm, lips curled in that signature smile. "Wesley," she said, kissing his cheek lightly. "You know I've been thinking a lot about that DHS bid, the one involving AI pattern recognition in urban grids. You haven't said much about it." Wesley glanced at Zariah briefly. She began, recording with her discreet audio pen. "Oh, it's still in early planning," Wesley replied coolly. "But the algorithm is almost ready. If it works, it'll revolutionize threat detection. No leaks, no exposure. We've got it locked down." Victoria's eyes lit up, just a fraction too much. "That's brilliant," she said, brushing her hair back. "I imagine there'll be foreign interest, too. Could be tricky if it got out." Her tone was gentle, curious, but underneath, it had the same pressure as a scalpel at the throat. She leaned in. "And what if, hypothetically, you had a way to protect your position before the leak even occurred? Just hypothetically." That was it. The slip, the twist of the knife. She was fishing, for weaknesses, for data leaks, for ammunition. Wesley felt a strange calmness settle over him. Not anger, not pain, just cold confirmation. He leaned back. "You've always had such an interesting take on international tech law," he said, almost smiling. "We should revisit that conversation. At the gala. Big players will be there, including some foreign investors." Victoria nodded, her posture softening. She believed she had won. Again. After the meeting, Zariah approached him. "You were right," she said quietly. She didn't even try to hide it. Wesley nodded. "Thank you for being there." But she shook her head. You weren't the one she underestimated. She was right. Zariah had sat in on dozens of meetings with Victoria lurking nearby, always smiling, always probing. She remembered every offhand comment, every calculated glance. She had stitched it all together like a patchwork quilt of betrayal. And now, the picture was complete. Victoria Langford wore two faces, one for the cameras, the donors, the polished public. The other face, cold, unforgiving, treasonous. But what she hadn't counted on, what no one in that world ever seemed to see, was the girl in the corner, the quiet one. The one listening, watching, remembering. And this time, the girl in the corner had teeth. The grand ballroom at the Langham Hotel gleamed with crystal chandeliers, polished marble floors, and an impressive crowd dressed in tuxedos and designer gowns. The air was thick with the murmur of high-stakes deals and champagne toasts. This was the kind of event where billionaires rubbed shoulders with government officials, where alliances were forged and fortunes made, or lost. Tonight, Wesley Kincaid was here to unveil a secret weapon, but not the one anyone expected. Victoria Langford glided through the crowd like a queen, her polished smile flawless and her eyes sharp. She moved with practiced ease, every gesture, choreographed to charm investors and media alike. To most, she was the perfect fiancée, poised, brilliant, untouchable. But Wesley watched her carefully from across the room. Every step she took, every laugh she shared, was being catalogued, analyzed. He wasn't just here to witness her performance. He was here to end it. The foreign buyer Victoria had secretly arranged to meet was no stranger to Wesley. In fact, the entire deal was a ruse, a carefully crafted trap designed to expose her betrayal once and for all. Wesley's cybersecurity team had been working feverishly behind the scenes to ensure everything went according to plan. Cameras had been installed discreetly around the ballroom, and an encrypted data link was ready to broadcast the damning footage Zariah had helped uncover. Victoria approached the table where the supposed buyer waited, her smile tightening as she leaned in to whisper, "Everything's set. They'll transfer the funds tonight. Kincaid won't suspect a thing." Her voice was low, but it carried the cold confidence of a woman who had plotted in shadows for months. Wesley's finger hovered over the remote, control in his pocket. Around him, the crowd laughed and mingled, unaware of the storm about to erupt. Suddenly, the lights flickered, and then went out completely. Gasps and murmurs swept through the room. A collective tension crackled in the air. In the darkness, a spotlight snapped on, fixed squarely on the massive projector screen hanging above the stage. The screen flickered to life, and the first images appeared. Secret meetings between Victoria and anonymous figures, files being transferred on encrypted devices, whispered conversations about selling company secrets to foreign competitors. The grainy footage was crystal clear, undeniable proof. Victoria's eyes widened as the crowd's attention snapped to the screen. Panic flickered across her face, but she forced a smile as the whispers grew louder. The projector switched to audio. Her voice filled the ballroom, every word dripping with greed and deception. "Once Kincaid's IPO crashes, we'll own the market. The company's secrets belong to whoever pays the highest price." The room fell into stunned silence. Security guards subtly positioned near Victoria's side tightened their grip, but she remained standing, trying to maintain control. Wesley stepped onto the stage, his calm presence cutting through the chaos. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, voice steady and clear. "What you've just seen is a betrayal, not only of me, but of every investor, every employee, and the integrity of this company." He paused, letting the words settle. "Victoria, Langford was working against us all, selling out Kincaid Holdings to foreign interests for personal gain." Gasps erupted, followed by a flurry of whispered questions. Cameras flashed as reporters scrambled to capture the moment. Victoria's father, a powerful senator, stormed out of the room, furious and humiliated. Investors who had been on the fence now turned their backs, calling their lawyers and canceling deals. Victoria's perfectly curated image crumbled like fragile glass. She tried to shout her innocence, but the weight of the evidence was too great. No one listened. Off to the side, Zariah stood silently, watching the fallout unfold. The girl who had whispered a warning weeks ago now bore the quiet satisfaction of justice served. After the crowd began to disperse, Wesley approached Zariah. He placed a hand on her shoulder, his eyes reflecting gratitude and newfound respect. "You did more than just see the truth, Zariah. You saved this company and exposed the real enemy." She nodded quietly, the enormity of the moment sinking in. The girl who had once felt invisible had just altered the course of a billionaire's empire. The trap was set, the betrayal exposed, and the silent intern who spoke up had won the battle she had only just begun. The grand ballroom at the Kincaid Holdings Gala gleamed with crystal chandeliers and polished marble floors, a playground for the powerful. The room was packed with investors, CEOs, media representatives, and socialites, all eyes trained on the glittering event. At the center stood Victoria Langford, the perfect image of elegance and ambition. Her smile was practiced, her every word carefully measured, as she engaged in conversation with a sharply dressed man who introduced himself as a potential foreign buyer interested in acquiring one of Wesley's most guarded technologies. Victoria's voice was smooth and confident as she whispered about terms, timelines, and confidential figures, assuming the buyer was as loyal to her as she was cunning. She didn't realize that every syllable was being recorded, not by the man beside her, but by the very host of the evening, Wesley himself. At Wesley's signal, the lights abruptly cut out, throwing the room into a shocked silence. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd, flickering with the soft glow of emergency exit signs. Then, a large projector screen blinked on against the far wall, flooding the space with stark white light. Faces turned, curiosity sharpening into confusion as the first images appeared. The tiny spy camera hidden in Wesley's office ceiling, then footage of Victoria's clandestine meetings, her voice caught on tape, plotting deals that would undercut the company and betray the trust of its founder. The room fell deadly quiet. Victoria's polished facade crumbled as the incriminating footage played. Her whispered negotiations, her attempts to sell secrets to an anonymous offshore buyer, all there laid bare for everyone to see. Her eyes darted wildly, searching the crowd for an ally, but none came. Whispers swelled into gasps of disbelief. Her father, a prominent senator, stiffened in his seat and stormed out in anger, his reputation now entangled in his daughter's disgrace. Investors exchanged worried glances, murmuring about withdrawing their support. Victoria's social allies evaporated like smoke in the cold night air. For once, her carefully built empire of influence and deceit began to crumble. Victoria tried to speak, her voice breaking as she cried out accusations of betrayal and lies. But her words fell on deaf ears. Security moved swiftly, surrounding her and escorting her out of the gala, her face flushed with humiliation and fury. Wesley stood silently in the shadows near the projector, his expression unreadable. Then he turned and walked over to where Zariah stood quietly, watching the spectacle unfold with calm eyes. "You saved everything," he said softly, voice thick with gratitude and admiration. "You saw what no one else dared to look for." Zariah nodded, her gaze steady. The room was still buzzing, but in that moment the power dynamics had shifted irrevocably. The billionaire and the intern, once worlds apart, were now partners forged in truth and justice. In the weeks that followed the gala, the fallout from Victoria's unmasking sent shockwaves through both corporate and political circles. Headlines screamed about the billionaire who exposed his fiancée's treachery and saved his empire from ruin. Yet beneath the blaring news, a quieter story took shape. Zariah's life transformed almost overnight. The once overlooked intern was now at the center of every conversation at Kincaid Holdings. Wesley personally appointed her director of a newly formed Innovation and Security Division, a role designed to harness her sharp instincts and fearless insight. Her office was sleek but modest, a symbol of the company's investment in fresh talent and new perspectives. Zariah still walked the halls with the same quiet confidence. But now, when she entered a room, conversations paused. Respect followed. Her sharp mind, keen observation, and courage had earned her a place not only in the firm, but in the hearts of those who once dismissed her. In a heartfelt meeting, Wesley looked at her and said, "You didn't just uncover a camera. You uncovered a whole new way for us to protect what we've built. You changed everything." But Zariah's rise wasn't just professional. Back home, in her neighborhood, she became a symbol of possibility and hope, proof that intelligence and integrity could shatter glass ceilings and expose lies, no matter where you came from. Late one afternoon, as the sun dipped behind the city skyline, Zariah sat at her desk reflecting on how far she'd come. She thought about the whispered warning that had started it all. How a simple act of courage, just speaking up, could change the course of lives. She smiled quietly to herself. The girl who once blended into the shadows had become a beacon of light. And for Wesley, the billionaire once wary of trust, Zariah was more than a trusted advisor. She was a reminder that true power lies not in titles or wealth, but in the courage to speak truth, even when no one else will listen.